Obviously, the main focus here is what is MDM. We're gonna focus on foundations. What is master data management? But we can talk about governance. We can talk about data quality. We can talk about data strategy as well. I think we will today. There's a lot of roads we could go down, but we'll be focused on MDM foundations. But we can take the conversation really anywhere that you want to, because this is for you. This is to help you better understand some of the core concepts behind MDM, definition of MDM, how to implement MDM, software, processes, people, governance, you name it. This is for you. I'm going to ramble just a little bit more to allow people to join. Hey, let's get into it. I'm glad everybody could be joining, and let's focus on some MDM foundations, shall we? I'm going to share a little video. It's only 2 minutes. And it's me talking about what is MDM, sharing my definition of what it actually is. And then we'll go for a break and we'll respond to that and we'll answer any questions that you may have. But let's start with a little video focused on let's call it more of a business perspective of what is master data management. Here we go. MDM, Master Data Management, is a technology-enabled discipline to allow organizations to create business rules and manage business rules for consistent and accurate and trustworthy and fit for purpose shared data assets across the organization. So that last little bit there is really important, shared data assets. So these things all together, the policies, the procedures, this is data governance, technology enablement, which is the software. It's a critical aspect of most large-scale MDM initiatives, and plus, of course, the idea of data being widely shared across the organization, across systems, applications, disciplines. This is where the economies of scale really come to the fore, where you can have consistent management of customer data, product data, or asset data to allow for economies of scale, to allow for business efficiencies, to allow for consistent decision-making across the organization. So MDM at its heart enables both operational efficiencies in terms of allowing the organization to operate far more efficiently than it ever would as individual silos. But it also, beyond the operations efficiencies, it also enables organizations to scale and to generate new revenue streams, to understand their customer needs, to drive new innovation within their organization. So that's what MDM is. All right. A few things that I didn't touch on there. One is I was really focused on the operational aspects of MDM. It is a way of enabling economies of scale within business functions. I'll give you an example. Quote to cash. A quote coming out of a CRM system, cash being recognized in an ERP system. That's a cross-functional workflow that needs consistent treatment of the data that is flowing between those systems. So you've got customer data and contract data and maybe even product data sitting on a quote. And this is just one business process, for example, sitting in a quote, right, in a CRM system that needs to go into an ERP system so the revenue can actually be recognized, an invoice can be sent. So those two systems need to have a common definition for customers, for contracts, for products, maybe even for locations. And how do you do that? That's master data management. So I was really focused on the operational impacts of MDM, but there's also analytical impacts of MDM and benefits from MDM. How do you create a report that spans those business functions where you have consistent aggregations of customer related data or of product related data, where you have a common and consistent definition of those things across those processes and workflows? So yes, this is about accurate reporting. Most certainly, this is about accurate reporting. How many of you, kind of hate to hear the question of, well, how many customers do we have? Because it's going to take you weeks to create that report where you have to manually reconcile data from across multiple silos within your organization. MDM helps solve for that because it breaks those functional silos and allows interconnectivity between those silos, whether that's supporting an operational business process like quote to cash or procure to pay, or an analytical process. So MDM is a discipline, people, process, technology, right, that helps you break down functional and system-based silos to create economies of scale within your organization. One way I look at it is that MDM is really kind of the glue within your organization between very siloed business processes that naturally exist within your company. Sales tends to be a little siloed off from finance, and that's okay. But how do you bring them together? Master data management. Master data is what enables that connectivity. Master data management is the discipline to enable it. I hope that makes sense. If you've got questions, Douglas or Doug, Profisee model pricing for Profisee, happy to share that. We can certainly take that offline. I'm not going to share the details here in this presentation because really not the goal for today, but thanks for the question. If you do have questions, folks, please let me know. So that's one way of thinking about MDM. A few other key points from what I just shared. Focus on shared data. MDM is all about data that is widely shared across the organization, data that flows from between systems and processes, right? Where you need consistent definition, consistent structure, consistent hierarchies. MDM is about data that is widely shared. If data isn't shared, is MDM relevant? If you've got data that is just sitting in a CRM, for example, let's look at a customer record in a CRM. You could have 200 fields of data defined for any one customer object or a prospect object, account object, doesn't matter. But you could have 200 fields of data sitting defined for that thing and managing it. But is that data for those, are all 200 fields being shared? Nope, probably not. Probably only 10 or 20 of them are being widely shared. That's the data that needs consistent definitions and structure and management, quality standards applied to it. The other 190 fields of that data, sales can do whatever it wants because it never leaves, it never goes beyond the functional silo that is sales. If it's only relevant to sales or to marketing, if it's only relevant to those organizations and is never shared, well, then you can have the business rules be very, very different and you can have the quality standards be different, I would argue. And that's not master data. Doesn't mean it's not important. So we need to draw a distinction here, folks, between the importance of data and whether it's widely shared. You can think data is really, really important, but unless it's widely shared, then it's probably not master data. Let me share another really high-level video before I probably get into some of the nuancy discussions related to things like a single version of the truth versus maybe a single source of the truth. We're gonna peel that onion in a little bit here, folks. I didn't actually say single version of the truth in the previous definition. We certainly can. We'll peel that onion in a bit, but let me share one more video with a little bit, maybe more of a technical perspective of what MDM is. Here goes. MDM through more of a technical lens. If we were to look at this more from an architectural perspective, what MDM is it is a data hub. It's a data hub, and it's also an integration hub that will typically sit above source systems. So you can imagine you've got multiple systems of data, CRM, ERP, digital marketing platforms, you name it. These are the systems of record for things like customers and assets, employees and locations, where all of these data is sitting in these individual silos. MDM is a data hub that will sit on top of, physically speaking and virtually speaking, sit on top of these systems and will manage copies of customer data, product data, asset data, location data in that data hub. So it's a physical hub and it's also an integration hub because MDM is tied to those source systems. MDM will sit between the source systems and analytical systems. So MDM will take the data, will create a single trusted gold master version of customer, asset, and location, where that information can be provided to analytical systems. It can also be pumped back down into those source systems. So then no longer do you have multiple versions of customer, multiple versions of product, either within a silo or across silos. So MDM can enable you to have a single trusted, consistent view or consistent operational version of a customer record or an asset record or employee record, any of that data that is widely shared across the organization. All right. So I reiterated some of the things that I had previously shared, but the primary point of that last little snippet there was to take a little bit more of a technical perspective, maybe an architectural view. One way to think about this is you've got multiple source systems, CRM, ERP, procurement system, HR system, you name it. Could be any source system. Could even be an analytical database, actually. You could have multiple analytical databases. Doesn't have to be a business, a software application. Could be analytical database one, analytical database two, but you've got multiple sources of data. MDM hubs will sit above those sources of data and, yes, will take small snippets of data out of those systems, replicate them into an MDM data hub. So again, we're not talking about all 200 fields of your customer record. We're not. We're talking about a small, significant subset of data related for, in this case, customers. It could be product, could be asset, could be location, doesn't matter. But we're going to take a small replica of that data out of those source systems and bring them into a single data hub, which is an MDM solution. At that point, we will resolve all of the differences that naturally exist within those source records, right? We'll match them together. We'll determine whether Acme, Acme Inc., Acme Co., and Acme LLC are one thing or four things, right? So we will determine if we will deduplicate them. We will determine if they should be one thing or four things. The way we do that is by applying business rules to that data, match rules, and something called survivorship rules to that data. I'm kind of getting into the weeds here, but the whole idea is to understand how many unique entities are we actually working with, where uniqueness is a function of business rules that you define through a governance program. So this starts to get into the conversation of, is MDM governance, is governance MDM, are these things one thing, or these things two things? Man, I'm moving a lot today. Nobody can ever say that I'm not passionate about this stuff. Anyway, when it comes to governance, one way to look at it is that governance is the requirements. It's the what, and MDM is the how. MDM actually implements governance requirements, AKA governance policies. You'll set a governance policy for, how do I uniquely define a customer? You'll set governance policies related to the minimum data quality standards for a customer. You'll set other governance policies related to things like, how do customers relate to each other, AKA a hierarchy, right? These rules will be defined as policies as part of governance program. The rules will then actually be configured into MDM software and executed and managed within MDM software. So that means if MDM is evaluating a large set of data related to customers and it sees four versions of Acme, Acme Inc., Acme Co., Acme LLC, it will implement the rules as defined in a governance policy to determine how many customers do I actually have here. So governance and MDM go hand in hand. I would argue if you stand up MDM as a discipline, people, process, technology, it's a discipline. It's not just software. It is a discipline. It is a way of managing data. I would argue if you implement MDM as a discipline, whether you have a formalized data governance effort or not, you will be doing data governance. You have to, because you have to define all those rules. You have to define what is a customer. That is a governance decision, whether you formalize it or not, whether you have a data governance committee, whether you have somebody with the title of data governance. If you are defining that rule, what's a customer? How do customers relate to each other? What are the quality standards for this data? If you are defining those rules and if you're configuring them within an MDM system, that's governance. But MDM and data governance go hand in hand. So I often used to get the question when I was an analyst at Gartner, I'd get the question all the time of, well, do I have to do governance first, right? Do I have to implement this giant, data governance program in order to get the value out of MDM? The answer is no, not an entire data governance program. What I would recommend is that you take more of an agile MVP type approach and you define only what is needed in order to implement MDM to get the benefits from MDM. And that's the video I'm going to share next. Why do you do all of this? Why do you need to create common definitions and common structures and quality policies? And why do you need to do MDM in the first place? That's the next video I'm going to share. Let's make sure that we're getting to some of the questions though. Two questions have come in regarding the recording. I have to assume the answer is yes. Kayla, keep me honest on providing the recording. I don't know why we wouldn't. I did see a question here from Parth related to MDM certifications for Profisee. We'll take that one offline if you don't mind. But yes, we have a certification related to Profisee. We're happy to help you through that process. Okay, yes, you will receive the recording in your email later this week. Okay, there you go, y'all. You will get the recording later this week. Fantastic. Christo, my take on MDM solutions can be seen as an advanced data governance and classified as the operationalization. That's a tough word, man. Of data governance, but it is also falling under data architecture as it is a data solution. You're correct. Totally agree with you, Christo. So you have to define, in the last video that I shared, I talked about MDM being a data hub. That is an architecture decision. If you wanted, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you wanted to have more of a point-to-point set of point-to-point interactions where you are trying to move data from a CRM to an ERP and you wire them directly together, you could make that decision as an architecture. You could do it. I wouldn't recommend it. Really hard to scale. And trust me, I've learned this the hard way by doing that exact same thing. You could try to manage all this in point-to-point interactions and integrations between systems, but that is a house of cards that will eventually crumble, I would argue. And setting a single hub above all of those various source systems is an architecture decision. So yes, MDM does require, from a technology perspective, it requires some focus on architecture. From a business process perspective, so people, process, technology, right? This is a discipline. It's all three of those things. It's not just technology, people and process. From a people and process perspective, there are implications here from an operating model perspective. This starts to get into the idea of what are called MDM implementation styles. How are you going to implement? What is the system of record for master data within your organization? Is that system of record within the hub, or is it within the sources, or maybe some combination of both? When we start talking about how we implement MDM, what we're really talking about here at a deeper level is the operating model of the business. How does your business operate? Is it a highly centralized top-down business? An example is maybe some manufacturing companies that tend to be a little more top-down, right? That don't necessarily embrace the idea of a lot of autonomy at an operating level. If you're making jet engines or medical devices or other things where you need strict control over everything from a process perspective and an engineering perspective, maybe you're making pharmaceuticals, right? You don't want your business units to go do whatever they want to do. That would be a bad model for a pharma company and for a company that is making things that people's lives depend on, right? So entire autonomy around data management at a functional level for some companies doesn't make sense. So a more centralized model for those companies makes complete sense, right? A more centralized implementation pattern of MDM where you have a single hub that is pushing master data into operational systems, where the only place where you could create a new master record would be that hub, and the hub feeds all of the source systems. For some companies, that centralized pattern is the right pattern. It's not for all. For most companies these days, let's be honest, people want and organizations want and business functions want a lot of autonomy. That's a different operating model for those businesses, which means there's a different implementation style for those businesses. So yes, there is this concept of implementation styles with MDM about how you can implement it from a technology perspective and how you can support it from a governance perspective. At a high level, those implementation styles really come down between two opposing forces. How much central authority do we have over data management? And how much local authority do we have when it comes to data management? How much freedom do we have to define our own rules versus how many of those rules are defined from more of a central perspective, right? Answering those questions is a function of your business requirements. How does your business operate? Again, I was giving the example of if you're making jet engines or medical devices or whatever, right? Where you need a lot of control over business processes, centralized data management makes a lot of sense. If you're a software startup or if you're a software company and you're making whatever software for anything, probably want a lot more autonomy. Both are okay. Both are valid models. Your MDM software provider needs to be able to support both of those, and your governance model needs to be able to support both of those. So yes, Christo, I do agree with you. It is advanced data governance. It is the implementation of governance policies. It's the execution, enforcement, and management of governance policies. I would argue MDM is essentially all about scale, right? You could write a data governance policy on a piece of paper that says, here's how I define a customer, right? And you could have that piece of paper stuck on every cubicle, on every desk, on every workplace, and every place that people are managing, creating, stewarded customer data, and say, okay, well, here's our policy and you need to follow it. But it's going to be really, really hard to scale that model because nobody's going to follow it. There aren't any sort of automated ways to enforce any of those rules. There's no oversight of the management of those rules. There's no stewardship of the data that as it gets created. That's where MDM comes into play from a technology perspective and a discipline perspective. It can allow you to scale the rules and have a single place to manage those rules and configure the rules. So is it advanced data governance? I think so, but let's separate governance from MDM. Governance is the rules. MDM is the enforcement of the rules, and that's how you scale. Because you can do that all automated. You can do all the matching that I was talking about. You could set the rules, have it happen in more of an automated fashion, right? That's what will drive the scale. Let me make sure I get to questions. I'm on the Q&A tab. I do see people putting a lot of questions in the chat as well. I'll try to follow both threads, walking and chewing gum at the same time here. Kingsley, at what stage will a small company implement MDM for data governance? That's a great question. Kingsley, there's really no one size fits all here. There just isn't. You know, in my experience, having been an MDM analyst for several years and being in the space for several years, things at some point, 100 million, 200 million question mark. That's kind of been what I've seen as a rough rule of thumb. When companies hit a certain size, 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, the pain of manual master data management, which is what generally most are doing, right? They'll try to create some sort of master spreadsheet. Maybe they will be using kind of like early stage MDM implementations like MDS from Microsoft, where you're trying to create and manage some idea of master data or reference data on more of the database side, or on more of the analytics side. But where the on the operational side of the house, some of the pains just get so acute, right? Where you actually have to hire. And by the way, I've done this. I had people that did this. We call them swivel chairs, where they were literally taking contract details out of a CRM system and manually rekeying contract details into an ERP system. There wasn't much of a swivel because it was just two monitors, but you get my point. At some point, those pains become too acute and companies start to look for MDM. It does have, the operating model of your organization certainly has some impact here. If you tend to be more centralized and more top down, the MDM pains become more acute later, right? Because chances are pretty good you're already process centric, you're already engineering centric, you're already very rule centric, and you're already probably fairly top down. I would argue for those companies, the business pains caused by a lack of MDM don't manifest themselves until much later in their life cycle as a company. But if you're maybe like a smaller moving company that is growing like wildfire and that is highly decentralized and has a lot of autonomy, where sales and marketing do whatever they want and finance does whatever they want, in those companies, you're probably going to feel some of those pains a lot earlier. Sorry, no one size fits all answer there, but often when it comes to MDM, the pains are manifested first in analytics. And where it is, somebody starts complaining about the customer report and they see Acme 4 times. And they'd be like, wait a minute, this can't be right. Right? There's no way we can have 4 separate Acmes all on 123 Elm Street. Right? People start to question the reports, particularly senior executives. Right? Where your senior executives will look at a report and there's like, I do not trust this data at all. There's duplicates, there's inconsistent data. I happen to know for a fact we sold a deal to Acme last week and it's not showing up on the revenue report. Why? When you start to hear people grumble like that internally, that's an indicator that there's maybe some master data related problems here. So A lot of these challenges, a lot of these pains are not consistent. They're not always the same, but honestly, in my experience, analytics is just about the first place where these things start to manifest themselves. I need to go back and make sure I answer all the questions. Do we get a recording? Yes. Carlos, what is the way to learn and apply the knowledge for customers? Well, so I do this for a living. If this is your first time interacting with me, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm posting content all day. Well, not all, well, almost all day sometimes, every day, most certainly, on how to better manage your data, whether that is customer master data, whether that is data quality, whether that's governance, whether that's data strategy. I am posting useful content every day through LinkedIn. We've also got a podcast, the CDO Matters podcast. So check out CDO Matters podcast. Check out the Profisee website under the resources section of the Profisee website. I'm posting white papers. We've got so much content around MDM and data governance. It's really remarkable how much we've got out there. So that was a very generic question, but if this is your first time joining and hearing me speak or some of the things that we're sharing, the resources we got go well beyond just this webinar. And we've got a veritable treasure trove of data related to best practices around master data, including customer data. So thank you so much for that question, Carlos. Paulo, how MDM is seen by the business, naming conventions, validation rules? Well, that's a really good question. Often the business, sadly, sometimes the business sees MDM often as a way of slowing down the business. And it's our job as MDM professionals to turn that and to a place where they're seeing MDM as a critical enabling function, right? When you do MDM the right way, I would argue if you're doing this the right way, let's, for example, say I'm creating a new customer record in a CRM system, right? Where that CRM system is connecting in real time to an MDM hub to ask a question like, well, Paulo is trying to create a new record for Acme Incorporated. Does this record already exist or not? Right? And have that lookup happen in real time as you're creating a new record within your CRM system. To me, that would be a value add to say, well, there's already one here that already has some contracts associated to it and some leads associated to it. That's an example of a great way to implement MDM because you're not slowing anybody down. You're actually probably accelerating them. They're making it faster to create that record. You're telling them things that they don't know. Oh, we already have a relationship with Acme Incorporated. That's fantastic. Or you're providing a report that is way more accurate than it ever was in the past. So the business can see MDM in a very positive way when you do it the right way. If it's seen as something that is slowing everything down and too many rules if it's seen as a burden, well, then that's not a place you want to be in as a data leader. There are things that you can do, though, to make MDM easier, to deeply interweave it into business processes, to make it be seen as a value add. That's where we really need to get to. The answer to those questions go well beyond the discussion that we've got today. So again, I would certainly welcome you to connect with me on LinkedIn and connect with all the content that we produce here at Profisee. Douglas, learning hub where people can skill up. Yes, we do have a learning hub. I already mentioned the resources tab, but we also have a certification section if you want to specifically focus on Profisee. But if you're just looking for best practices related to master data management, data governance, data quality, start at the resource section of the Profisee website. Look me up on LinkedIn. Check out the podcast. Come to some industry conferences. There's some great ones out there. I'll be at Boston all next week at the CDOIQ conference. There are others. A company called Dataversity puts on a few great events throughout the year called DGIQ, Data Governance and Information Quality. So there's a lot of resources out there, Douglas, a lot. Kishore, can we get data governance quality reports from an MDM tool? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You can get those reports out of an analytical layer as well. I would fully expect any MDM solution, including Profisee, to have robust reporting capabilities to show, for example, when there is data in the hub that does not comply to a data quality rule. For example, if you have a field of data that you expect to see be present on a record and it's not there, well, then you can flag that record. In a solution like Profisee, that record gets flagged and then it gets forwarded via workflow process to a data steward for that problem to be resolved. But most certainly, a big part of what MDM does is to shine a light on some of these big challenges that we've got related to data quality and data consistency and data accuracy, all of the attributes of data quality, right? You could absolutely set up triggers and alerts within Profisee and other MDM hubs to say, hey, something's not right here, and let's run a report to see how often that happens. This is a critical aspect of managing a data quality function, being able to have visibility on when your data is complying with your quality standards and when it is not. But keep in mind here that what we're talking about here is master data. Okay, MDM is the place where data quality rules are managed for master data. Master data is that data that is shared widely across the organization. So will you see data quality rules being managed for data that is not master in an MDM hub? No, you probably won't. This is that 190 fields of your customer record that is not widely shared. It's the example that I was giving earlier. So there is a distinction here between data quality that is managed for master data versus data quality that is managed for everything else. These worlds are starting to slowly come together, but for right now, those data quality exception reports that you're talking about, we would see those reports being a reflection of data that is shared widely across the organization, aka master data. Yes, you can, Kishore. Good question. Kingsley, at what stage is small company? Answered that one already. Ashim, can you please clarify the relevance of MDM for a building material? Well, all materials, right? All materials, whether that is a building material, whether that is materials that are being used in the creation of anything, this shirt, this microphone, everything we buy and everything we consume is consists of materials. And materials management is a common MDM use case. So if you work for a manufacturing company where you are managing a complex supply chain, where you have to go procure thread and you have to go procure dye and you have to go procure buttons, those are all materials that go into the creation of a finished product. Materials management is a very common, we call them domain in MDM. You could call it an object, but we call them domains, right? So the materials domain, we have many customers using Profisee to manage their core materials. And the reason why you manage materials in an MDM is because so many companies have multiple ERP systems. If you only have one ERP system, right, and you use that ERP system to procure buttons, thread, dye, you name it, and there's only one system, right, where that's done and where that data is managed, you could argue you don't necessarily need MDM for materials management. But what's common in so many manufacturing companies is there's multiple ERPs with slight differences in how they manage and procure all their materials across their complex supply chain. When you've got 4, 5, 6, 7 ERP systems and they all call a button slightly different, or they've got different attributes for a die or for a thread, that's a problem. And that's when you have MDM sitting over top of those multiple ERP systems, so you can tie them all together. So yes, materials management is a very common MDM use case. So it's relevant, whether that's a building material or you name it, any material that goes into a finished product. How do you implement real-time MDM features like merging, dedupe? Well, real-time is hard because first of all, you have to define real-time. We've all had this conversation, right? Like, oh, I need real-time reports. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, what does that mean? Real-time can be harder, and the reason why it's harder is because technically what you're talking about is an operational style of MDM. At a very high level, there are two styles of MDM: operational, analytical. I touched on this in the second video. An analytical style of MDM, all you're trying to do is to link like things together. Customers, employees, materials, products, where you've got Acme Incorporated, Acme LLC. You've got 3 different source records, and all you're trying to do is link them together so your reports are accurate. So I've got one ID that I can use to link all of those 3 child IDs together and any transactional data related to any of those IDs. That's analytical MDM. And you can do those forms of MDM relatively quickly because the rules you need to define are far simpler. You're not asking your business processes to change. You're not changing how you onboard customers or how you manage the data. All you're trying to do in an MDM system is to find a way to make the reports as accurate as you possibly can by making sure that like things are correctly linked together. That's analytical MDM. When you start talking real time, that's operational MDM. That's the situation that I described earlier where I'm typing in something into a CRM system and I'm making a real-time call out to an MDM hub to say, does this thing exist already or not? The minute you start implementing operational forms of MDM, where there's a two-way flow of information between an MDM hub and a source system, the minute you do that, things get a little more complex because necessarily what you're going to do is you're going to ask your business partners to probably act a little differently than they do today. An example would be, a very simple example would be, okay, well, we need to make this a required field. And it wasn't a required field yesterday. Business users are probably going to grumble a little bit. Why is this a required field? It wasn't a required field yesterday. Or all of a sudden now you're doing a data quality check where there wasn't one previously. Or maybe there is some sort of oversight or other business rule that is being implemented that wasn't being done previously. So operational MDM can drive a ton of value for the organization. It can drive a ton of value for the organization, but it does require a tight partnership between IT and the business to define those rules and to refine the workflows related to data, whether that's customer data or product data or anything else, so that you come up with better ways of managing the data. But you're probably going to ask your business partners to slightly change how they operate, which can take time to implement. So you can do it. You can most certainly do it. It's a bit more of a challenge. Lauren from Hamilton, how does Profisee handle lineage of master data challenges? So typically, that's a really good question, by the way. Typically, lineage is the, let's call it the domain, for lack of a better word, of a data governance and or data catalog solution. So historically, as the world of data management has evolved, I would argue there's about 5 kind of key enabling capabilities of a data management focus. There's BI and analytics, there's data integration, there's data quality, there's MDM, and there's data governance. At least from a software perspective, there are these kind of various swim lanes. The MDM, oh, I'm knocking my mic around. The MDM swim lane is reasonably well established. It's been a competency for the better part of 20 years now. Same is true with data governance, AKA data catalogs. Historically, lineage is something that is managed in more of a data governance solution. But what you want from an MDM is where your MDM is deeply integrated to that data catalog solution. In the case of Profisee, we've got a deep integration to Microsoft's Purview. We also can integrate to Calibra, Alation, other data catalog solutions that typically would manage lineage. So for example, in the case of Profisee, you could actually log into Profisee, look at a customer master record and see the full lineage of it as that lineage information is being pulled out of a Purview data catalog. So these systems work hand in hand. What you really want out of an MDM is a system that can integrate to a governance solution, a catalog solution. Now, you may be asking yourself, hey, wait a minute, Malcolm. You said 15 minutes ago that MDM enables governance. It does. But now you're saying there's a separate governance solution. What gives? Well, governance is tough. Not because governance is difficult, is because there is no one single software solution for data governance. Even the software that is being sold as data governance software, like Calibra, like Alation, like Purview, that market themselves as data governance, only enable a fraction of what you need to support an entire governance framework. If you looked at a data governance framework like that done of DAMA, if you're familiar with DAMA, the DM Book of Knowledge, if you looked at the DAMA data governance framework, there's this wheel and there's 10 enabling things you need to do. There's access and security. There's even ethics. There's MDM, there's reference data management, there's data quality, there's access and controls. There's all sorts of things you need to do. And there isn't any one solution that manages all 10 of those aspects of a governance framework. MDM does its thing. Data quality tools do their thing. Data catalogs do their things. But historically, for whatever reason, data catalogs have kind of taken the name as a governance solution. And they only do a portion of what you need for an enterprise class approach to data governance. So MDM enables governance, data quality software enables governance, data integration tools enable data governance, BI tools even enable data governance. There is no one single data governance solution out there. Yet, for whatever reason, people who build catalogs say they're a data governance solution. Well, they're only a partial data governance solution. This is why you need your MDM tool to be able, like Profisee, to be able to integrate to your data catalog / data governance solution. Hopefully that makes sense. What are the implementation styles for an organization where data management is not centralized? Well, there are most certainly decentralized patterns to implement MDM. Most certainly there are. There's this idea of more of a registry model. There's an idea of a coexistence pattern where data can kind of coexist at where you can have master data living in two places at once, in essence, right? Where the master data can be persisted in a source system and also persisted in a hub. So most certainly there are decentralized patterns here, or where you can have all the master data entirely reside within the source systems, and that hub is basically just an integration layer between the systems, where the business rules are being managed in that central layer, but very little data is being persisted other than the keys, other than the IDs. That's more of a kind of a classic registry style. So there are certainly ways to approach more decentralized approaches to master data management. But keep in mind here, you need to be able to support those cross-functional views of the world. Let me maybe kind of share something here. There's one more video that I want to share, but I probably touched on it already. Let's talk about this idea of a single version of the truth. And what I actually prefer, because if you ask people what's MDM, most of the time they're going to say, oh, that's the single version of the truth. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. But when it makes sense to have a single version of the truth. And let me share with you a little graphic that will help this make sense. If I can figure out how to share my screen. They keep moving in our, you see me like hunting visually here. But keep moving some of the buttons in our, I can't actually see where I can share. They keep moving the buttons around. This drives me nuts. Okay, I'm not sharing. I can't find the button to share my screen. Ah, that is annoying. Oh no, there it is. Found it. Yay. I'll share a little graphic that will hopefully make things make a little more sense when it comes to single version of the truth. This is a really, really simple way of looking at things, but I think it's useful. Let's talk about the single version of the truth. Does MDM do single version of the truth? Well, yes, it does. But it also enables multiple versions of the truth. Let's drill down a little bit. What does truth mean? I would argue that the concept of truth is contextually bound, meaning what is true for marketing can be different than what is true for finance. We already see this in our organizations day in and day out. We know this to be true. The way that marketing operates is different than the way that finance operates. Marketing teams tend to have a lot more flexibility, a lot more decentralized, shall we say. Finance roles tend to be a little bit more centralized and a little more rules driven. These things, they can both be right at the same time, right? Trying to come up with a single version of the truth that spans both of those worlds can be a challenge if you follow a centralized pattern where there's only one version of the truth for everybody, for sales, for marketing, for procurement, for HR, for everybody. When there's only one version of that truth, you're asking everybody to adhere to that version of the truth, which for some companies makes sense. Like those manufacturing companies I was talking about earlier. Maybe you're making medical devices or jet engines or pharmaceutical at a functional level, a cross-functional level, and an enterprise-wide level, because the requirements here are slightly different at each of those levels. Again, at a functional level, what sales does 90% of the time probably doesn't impact what finance does or what HR does, right? And that's okay. And they should have that freedom. But when that sales contract needs to move from a CRM system to an ERP system, that's when the cross-functional rules need to fire. And beyond that, when the CFO runs a report and says, how many customers do we have? There's only one answer to that question. So this takes into account that there are multiple versions of the truth. And again, this is a bit of a more advanced way of thinking about MDM and an advanced way certainly to implement MDM. But I would challenge you to start embracing the idea that there can be multiple contexts in a company. And across each of these three contexts, the rules can be different. An MDM solution like Profisee gives you the flexibility to have multiple versions of the truth if your governance model and your business operating model support it. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's the kind of the bit about single version of the truth versus multiple versions of the truth, if it makes sense to you. Question from Mohammed. This is 1128. So I'm a little behind, Mohammed. My apologies. Do you go to business and recommend how they should be setting up their MDM processes, including the people elements of it? Or is it a fixed solution? Oh, no. You need to go to the business and work closely with them, because a big part of MDM is something called stewardship, right? Not to mention those business rules. Those business rules about how do I define a customer? IT probably shouldn't be in that business, right? IT should be working with the people on the business side to say, hey, marketing, how do you define a customer? Hey, finance, how do you define a customer? What do you expect to see? Right? What are your quality standards? When do you know your information for a customer is accurate? So this is the collaboration. And I said this in the first video, is the collaboration between IT and the business. The rules should ultimately be coming or heavily informed by the requirements of the business. So this is most certainly a partnership. You need to work closely with people on the business side. I've made the mistake of basically implementing an MDM without getting a lot of business input on it, and it was a dismal failure. I'd like to know, setting up an MDM tool would be bad habit and wrong habits should be eliminated. Well, the bad habit would be not getting enough business buy-in and not getting enough support from the business to do it, particularly if you are looking at more of those operational styles of MDM that I was talking about. Stephen, have you seen MDM implemented for a services firm with relatively few operational systems, but with hundreds of individual partners? Oh boy. Yeah, really good question. Answer yes. So maybe a model here would be like an investment services firm, where you've got a lot of local operators who are the representative of some big financial services, but are basically independent operators. Real estate models kind of aligned to this. There's a few other businesses that kind of align to these. It's not a franchise model. It's not but where you are a dealer broker of somebody or for somebody. Like I'm a broker for some large insurance company, but I'm an independent business, right? I'm managing my own financial services firm in Omaha or wherever. So answer yes. Pardon me. I would argue MDM is critical in those environments because of the complexity of the relationships that exist. So if you are some large insurance company or some large brokerage house, I don't need to pick on any one of them, but you get my point. And you are dependent on a broker network, you really, really need to understand who your brokers are. And you also need to understand who their clients are. Right. And management of complex business relationships is the domain of MDM, most certainly. So the short answer here, Stephen, is yes, absolutely. I've seen it done. How does Profisee MDM solution integrate with Azure? Happily take that one offline, Rishav. The short answer is deeply. We are integrated to the Purview data catalog. We are integrated to the Microsoft Fabric. In fact, we were a launch partner with Microsoft Fabric. We're integrated to Azure Data Factory. We are integrated to Synapse. We are integrated to Power BI. We're native data source within Power BI. So the short answer is deeply, and in very meaningful ways that are going to drive value for your organization. We can take the details offline. Ravi, can MDM work without data governance tools as it can have its own policy engine? Yeah, it can. As I mentioned earlier, you can define policies on a piece of paper, and you can configure those policies so they're managed in an MDM. So the short answer to your question is yes, absolutely. You can do MDM independent of having any sort of formalized governance tool. Most certainly there's a better together story here, right? When you're doing MDM and data cataloging, data governance, if you're doing them together, there most certainly is a better together perspective there. But I would argue that if you had to make a difficult choice between which two, I'd be focused on MDM. Because what I've seen a lot of data leaders do is focus on data cataloging as this kind of this ground up, I'm going to go find it all, like this treasure hunt across the organization to go find all of my data and put it into my catalog. Well, that's a useful exercise, but it's not driving a ton of business value, I would argue. You could say, oh, well, we need to, we're going to put all of our analytics and our dashboards into a data catalog, and we're going to put all of our data into a data catalog, and our business users will just benefit immensely from having a single place to go find all of their data. Well, maybe, but is that accelerating your procure to pay process? Is that accelerating your quote to cash process? Is that making your supplier onboarding 15% more efficient? Is that helping your sales team identify cross-sell and upsell opportunities? No, 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 no. So data catalogs are useful, important. I would argue increasingly critical. You need to do it. But if I had to make a difficult choice between MDM and data catalog, I'd be focused on MDM because it does focus on those operational aspects. It helps the business run more efficiently. Data catalogs on their own, I would argue, do not do that. That's my perspective. Christina, does Profisee solution write back to ERP? Yes, absolutely. That's what is called an operational style of MDM. There's analytical, data comes out of a source system, goes into an MDM, and then over to a BI platform. It never goes back to the source system. That's analytical MDM. Operational MDM, data comes out of the source system. It's cleaned up, it's deduplicated, it's managed, these rules are applied, and then it gets pumped right back in. Yes, absolutely. Douglas, how does Profisee deal with deduplication and create a golden record? Oh, the short answer is it does that by the implementation and execution of business rules that are defined as part of a governance process. So a key to doing deduplication, the first step you need to do is answer the question of, how do I uniquely define something? How do I uniquely define an employee, a customer, a product, a whatever, right? Like that is a governance decision you're going to have to make. But how Profisee deals with it is you define those, you first define the rules, and then you configure them into the system. So in Profisee and all MDM solutions, there are multiple dials that you can turn in terms of enabling what's called entity resolution, AKA matching. There's a lot of different dials that you can turn along the way. You can weight your address more heavily than a phone number. There are multiple variables you can look across. You can look across as many variables as you want to deduplicate a record. The system is infinitely flexible that way. And then there are these things called survivorship, which are the business rules that you will apply to pick a winner, in essence, right? Acme Inc., Acme Co. If you need to take those three things and make one thing, make a new master data record out of it, rules need to be defined. Are you going to do that at an object level or a field level, right? Are you going to take individual fields of individual records and put them into some new master record? These are all decisions that you need to make in advance of deploying that MDM solution. But once you do have the rules defined, they are relatively easy to configure within Profisee. Good question, Douglas. So, Lauren, I didn't answer your question, but I used the word lineage. My bad, I used the word lineage. Sorry, let me go back. And if, by the way, if you do ask questions, I'm stuck in the Q&A and I know that there are questions in the chat. So I will do my best to circle back and answer questions that are in the chat as well. And Lauren, I will probably need to circle back with you because I thought I answered the question about lineage, but if I didn't, my bad. I will follow up. We are running out of time quickly. Does Profisee have options of Mahesh real time? Yes, absolutely. We can integrate to Kafka streams, any sort of pub sub model to get data in quote quote real time from or to a source system. Yes. Kingsley, what makes you stand out as a data governance manager maximizing MDM capability? Oh, that's a long answer. We don't have enough time for. Shale, no, we're not talking about transactions. You asked the question, MDM is just for master. Are we also talking about transactions? No, we're not talking about transactions. I mean, we are from the perspective of being able to accurately and consistently aggregate them to the right customer record or product record or employee record. But transactional data is not the realm of MDM. It is not the realm of MDM. Now, there are interesting insights that you can glean from transactional data. For example, if you ran knowledge graphs against a lot of transactional data, if you ran some ML, maybe there are interesting things or patterns that would emerge that you could then take and manage as master data. For example, maybe there are relationships that you didn't know about. You manage the relationships through an MDM, but the insights that helped you understand that relationship could be getting developed in analytics platforms technically outside of an MDM. bit of a complicated question that requires probably a deeper response than what I provided, but we're running low on time. Linson, here's a fantastic question. Does it make sense to start with an analytical style of MDM first and then phase into an operational one? Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. That is the right way to do it. Start simple. Find people who have acute pains and real problems that could be addressed through more accurate reporting, right? So the example I gave is maybe a CFO complaining that the reports that she or he is looking at aren't accurate, or they're inconsistent, or not trustworthy. Okay. Could you make that CFO's life easier by having more accurate reports? If yes, that is an analytical style of MDM. Another example, materials we talked about earlier, the procurement of materials. Maybe your individual manufacturing sites are each individually procuring materials differently. And maybe you're getting them from the same suppliers and you don't know it. Could you run a report that showed where, instead of having 4 different records for a supplier, could you have a single consolidated trustworthy view of that supplier relationship that allowed you to maybe lower your prices, come up with more favorable terms within your contracts for that supplier? Could you run a report that showed opportunities for cross-sell and upsell within your marketing and sales organization? If the answer to those questions are yes, analytical MDM is absolutely the way to go, because you can drive significant value for the business without doing a lot of disruption to how it operates. So we are at the top of the hour. There are so many questions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My apologies if I didn't get to those questions. I'll do my best to get to them offline. Folks, keep in mind, we do this every third Friday of every month. We do CDO Matters Live, and I do an event just like this the third Friday of every month. Check Profisee.com for more details. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Please check out the resources we've got on Profisee.com. There's a ton of insight around what MDM is, and look for 2 more installments of this summer series coming shortly to a neighborhood near you. Thanks everybody so much for attending today. It's been my honor to present to you. We'll see you all again soon. Thanks.